Thank you, Chair. We're live on YouTube and the meeting is being recorded, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Licensing and Enforcement Subcommittee on the 19th of May 2021. I'm your Chair, Councillor Joe Wibley. I'd also like to welcome anybody watching the meeting via live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely. And as well as this being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So could you please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind council members that the code of conduct applies throughout this meeting, and we reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this licensing and enforcement subcommittee meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us while we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we're not able to do so, we will consider the meeting adjourned and we'll reconvene at a later date. And please check the committee page on our website for details if that should happen. All councillors have been sent an agenda for today's meeting, and any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. In the interests of all parties present, it is in the interest of all parties present that the virtual meeting runs in an orderly manner. So please bear the following points in mind throughout. Could you please make sure all phones are turned off and are on silent, and make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube, but please do not have the YouTube streaming on at the same time, as you'll not be able to hear or be heard if you're taking part in the meeting. When making your points, could you please focus on the 4 licensing objectives? The prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm, as any other points will not be relevant and will be disregarded by the subcommittee. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt other speakers. As the chair of the meeting, I will advise when it is the turn of the applicant, the responsible authority, and the interested parties to speak. There are a number of interested parties in the meeting, so when you're advised, please raise your electronic hand to indicate that you wish to speak, and you'll then be called in turn by name. Should we require comfort breaks, there'll be 10 minutes at 11 AM. If we're still going at 12:45, there'll be half an hour. And again, if we're still going at 3:30, there will be 10 minutes then. So we'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of subcommittee members here present. Councillors, can you unmute your microphone? And when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you confirm you're present, please mute your microphone again.
So, Councillor Bloxham.
Present.
Councillor Dent.
Present.
Councillor Wibley.
Present.
So I can confirm that we're correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. So agenda item 1 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 21st of April, which are on page 3 to 9 of the agenda. Councillors, if anyone has a comment on the last set of minutes held on the 21st of April, could you do so by raising your electronic hand? If there are no electronic hands raised, I'll take this as an indication that you agree the minutes of the previous meeting. I see no hands. Excellent. Okie dokie. So agenda item 2, apologies. We're all here, so we have no apologies, I assume.
No apologies.
Good. Okay, so agenda item 3, declarations of interest. We'll do a roll call for any declarations.
Councillor Bloxham.
None, thank you.
Councillor Dent.
None, thank you.
And Councillor Wibley.
I am an Exmouth Town Councillor for the ward in which the application this afternoon is. The one this morning, no declaration.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 4 is matters of urgency, and there are none. I assume I've heard of nothing. Okay, So agenda item 5 is confidential or exempt items. And again, there are no confidential or exempt items to discuss. So we move on to today's first main item, agenda item 6, which is an application for a premises license at the Blue Ball, Sandygate, Exeter. I'd like to welcome all participants. So here, this is the consideration of a new premises license to authorise the provision of regulated entertainment, provision of late night refreshment, and the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises. Okay, so the premises, this will take a little while as I go through the details. The premises is the Blue Ball and the address is Sandygate, Exeter. Okay, I believe the licensing officer who will be outlining this will be Steve Saunders. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Okay. Legal advice is provided by Mr. Asita Ratunga, barrister of Cornerstone Chambers. I'd now like to identify who is present and who's already given notice to the council in writing that they wish to address the subcommittee and their representatives. Just check that everybody's here for that. Okay, is it? I assume that all the interested parties that need to be here are here, right? Okay. Can I just check? I have lots of sort of additional things here that we've not used in previous meetings. Should I just? Right. Okay. Okay, we'll now hear from the licensing officer, which will be Steve, who will present a summary of his report. And then we'll hear from members, the applicant and interested parties.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. As previously mentioned, today's committee is asked to consider an application for the grant of a new premises licence for the Blue Ball at Sandygate in Exeter. The premises currently operates under an existing premises licence that was issued under licence number PLWA 0047, of which St Austell Brewery Company are the premises licence holders. St Austell Brewery are now applying for a new premises licence for the Blue Ball as a result of some alterations made to the premises. These include the addition of a shelter area attached to the main public house and alterations to outside areas, which include the addition of an external servery bar, which is proposed to be licensed for sale of alcohol. The applicant has stated that if the application being considered today is granted to a satisfactory standard, the existing premises licence will be surrendered. The application itself is set out at Appendix A today, and the plan submitted with the application can also be viewed under Appendices B1, B2 and B3. The licensable activities and the timings that have been applied for are also set out at Appendix C, and the timings authorised by the existing licensed have been summarised at Appendix D for matters of comparison. So to be clear, the licensable activities that have been applied for today are the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises, late night refreshment indoors and outdoors, and regulated entertainment. It should be noted that since the report has been prepared, the chair of the licensing subcommittee requested further information from the applicant, and additional appendices have been now included for the purposes of the report today. To run through these briefly, those additional documents are Appendix L, which shows a letter sent by this council's legal team to the applicant's solicitor and representative seeking some clarification. Appendix M sets out the response that has been received from the applicant's representative, and with appendices M1 and M2. The information that has been recently supplied was distributed to attendees yesterday. In total, we have 9 representations received against this application. It's worth noting that the applicant's representative has undertaken some mediation through contacting the interested parties directly in writing, and that letter can be viewed at Appendix J. At this stage, it is our understanding that there has been no subsequent agreement reached between the interested parties and the applicant. A representation was submitted by Devon and Cornwall Police, who have since reached an agreed position with the applicant in relation to this, and the amendments and additions that have been offered are set out under Appendix I. All representations can be reviewed in the body of the report itself, and the committee will be aware that they have details in Appendix G of the report today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, so I believe that we'll get the opportunity to ask you questions as and when required throughout the hearing. So I think now if we move on to the applicant's case, you'll have 10 minutes to speak regarding the application, and you'll be given a 30-second warning. We'd just like to say that when addressing us, you shouldn't raise any new issue not covered in the representations you've already lodged with council, or should you raise issues which are not relevant to the promotion of the licensing objectives at issue in this hearing, which is the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the prevention of protection of children from harm. Okay, so you have 10 minutes and you'll be given a 30-second warning. Mr. McGregor.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Ewan McGregor from TLT. I represent the applicants this morning. We also have on the call Chris Faulkner, who is the BDM for St Austell Brewery, and the DPS and tenant of the Blue Ball, Adam Holland. I think he dropped off briefly, but I think he's back on the call now. Can I ask the committee to have to hand 3 documents, which is Appendix C, Appendix D, and Appendix J? And I'm going to refer to this, and I will hopefully be within my 10 minutes of allotted time. Firstly, thank you to your officers for a very comprehensive report and for their assistance throughout in the run-up to this application. I'm going to just start by making 5 statements. The first is, and this comment has already been made, these are long-established premises that have held a license for many years. Secondly, these premises are not nor have they been subject to regulatory enforcement action and are not a burden on the enforcement authorities. And thirdly, and as a consequence of that, it's perhaps unsurprising that none of the responsible authorities make representations. Fourthly, if you grant this application as we request, it will be for more restrictive hours than is currently the case, and with more restrictive and more onerous conditions than on the current license. And finally, a comment that I made in my letter to the local residents is that it is not the St Austell Brewery's intention to change the style and nature of these premises. As your officer has said, the application has been brought about for a new license to rectify some changes that have been made to the premises, and in particular in relation to the addition of an external bar. And the application itself has drawn out some representations from local residents. We've agreed a position with the police. It may have been that the residents were unaware of what the old license or the current license permits. A mediation letter was sent to the residents at Appendix J, and we did say in that letter that if we were unable to agree a position, then we reserve the right to pursue the application as submitted. I can confirm to you that in the interest of trying to resolve this matter and in an attempt to be good neighbours and to be conciliatory, we are going to proceed with the application as set out to the local residents in my letter of the 10th of May, with some further additional amendments. So if you look at Appendix C, which is the summary of proposed licensable activities, and Appendix D, which is the summary of existing licensable activities, can I just run through those and so we all know what it is that we are applying for? Taking it from the top, exhibition of films, that is as stated on Appendix C, and that is as on the current license. At indoor sporting events, the time on New Year's Eve needs to be changed from 0900 to 0000, but otherwise it is as on the current license. The performance of live music, and this is perhaps critical to the whole discussion, is that indoor live music will be restricted to 2200 hours and outdoor live music will be restricted to 2000 hours. So more restrictive than is on the current permission, and that is as set out in my letter to the local residents. The playing of recorded music is as stated on Appendix C, and that is as on the current license. The performance of dance, as stated on Appendix C and as stated on the current license. H, entertainment of a similar description, that is as stated on Appendix C and as on the current license. Late night refreshment indoors, Friday and Saturday, if those hours could be amended to 2300 to 0030, not 0100. And the reasons for that will become apparent in a minute. There will be no late night refreshment outdoors. And the supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises will be as stated on the existing license. So until 12 midnight on each day of the week, save for New Year's Eve. And those are the New Year's Eve hours on each of those facilities is as stated on the current license. So we're not seeking to extend the hours for the sale of alcohol on Friday and Saturday. And that offer was made to the residents in my letter of the 10th of May. And the use of the external bar will be limited from 10 in the morning until 22:30. So far as the premises opening hours are concerned, the current hours are from 0900 until 0030. We did ask for the early opening from 7:30 in the morning, and that's not for licensable activity, but that's just for the sale of breakfast. And if the committee are minded to extend the hours of open to 07:30, we are happy. Equally, we would be content to stick with the existing opening timings, which is 0900 to 0030 on each day of the week, save for New Year's Eve. So I hope that that is all clear as to what it is that my clients are applying for. And I apologize for any part that I have played in increasing the amount of paperwork that this application has attracted. Insofar as conditions are concerned, if you look at Appendix J, which is the letter that I sent to the local residents on the 10th of May, there is a full list of conditions attached to that letter, which runs to 47 conditions. And this includes the conditions that have been agreed with the police, and these greatly enhance and update the conditions that are on the existing license. And I'll just draw your attention to, I think, 8 conditions. I'm not going to read them out, but at conditions 6, 7, and 8, at the schedule of conditions at Appendix J, are 3 conditions that relate to the use of the outside bar. And then at conditions 34, I suppose 34 through to 39, there are conditions that relate to public nuisance, and those are conditions that are not currently on the premises license. And so that is the application. I don't propose to say any more. We have, as your officer said, we haven't had any correspondence back from the local residents since our letter of the 10th of May. I make no criticism of that is their prerogative. I know that they have used the premises and been in, and hopefully they've had an enjoyable time whilst they're able to sit outdoors, and now that we're all able to sit indoors. But the provision, just very quickly, the provision of the external bar, it does assist in terms of social distancing through COVID. We all know the difficulties that the hospitality sector has been under over the last 15 months. It assists with service, and it also assists the premises to operate in a COVID compliant manner. So that is the application, and I would invite you to grant that.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor. First of all, then, do we have any questions as a committee for Mr. McGregor? If you'd like to raise your hand. That's Councillor Ben Bloxham. Councillor Bloxham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wonder if you could give us an indication of what checks are being put in place to monitor any potential noise, please.
That may be a question that can be answered by Adam, who is the DPS, and also by Chris, who is the BDM. But there are additional conditions that have been put in at 34 to 39 that attend to the requirements for noise checks to be made. I should have said, actually, when introducing Adam, is that he has been at these premises since 2019. I think took over shortly before lockdown. He's been a licensee he's been in the pub trade for 16 years, been in the business for 30 years. But there are checks as set out at 34 through to 39. Particularly, I suppose, at condition number 36, when regulated entertainment has been provided in the external areas, noise checks will be carried out at the nearest noise sensitive property. A noise log will be kept and maintained. And 37, the record and sound level if required and any action taken, and the noise log to be made available to officers on request. So those will be the checks that will take place when regulated entertainment takes place outside.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from Councillor Dent? Do you have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Dent.
Just a quick one. So how do you intend to carry out those checks? Very simply.
I think it will simply be a matter of somebody standing at the end of at the nearest noise sensitive property. It will be a physical check, and it will be speaking to the local residents to see what issues or problems that they have. The secret of any well-run premises is to try and maintain relationships with your nearest neighbours. And Adam, and if you want to hear from Adam, he is on the call. He is an approachable guy. The premises, I know the residents have been into the premises, and if they want to speak to him, they can if there are any problems. But it will initially be somebody standing at the nearest noise sensitive property to see whether or not there are any issues. If that escalates, then your officers would have the rights to say, well, we want you to put in certain additional measures, and at some point in the future, that might include things like noise limiters or people taking checks with. I don't know what they're called, but noise measuring meters. That's very poorly expressed, but there is that facility as well. But we're not there yet.
Right. Okay. Does Adam want to say anything on that? So,
yeah, Adam is an interesting.
As a man on the ground.
It's in terms of legal and the way that the meeting proceeds. Is it okay for Adam to speak at the moment? It would be useful to hear from him. I think he is an interested party.
Yeah. We did ask for him. We did say to the committee in advance that he would be available to answer any questions. And if it's helpful for you, then you should perhaps hear from him.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in on that? Is that Adam Holland, who's the DPS?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, so there's no, that was notified and he's here to assist the applicant. And if we have a question for him, he's entitled to answer.
I'm just trying to see if he's on your list of current attendees, but he appears to possibly have fallen off again.
Chair, he is in the meeting, but he's on mute at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Holland, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I'm here.
Brilliant. Okay. Councillor Bloxham, or actually no, Councillor Dent. Could you repeat your question to Mr. Holland?
Certainly, it was merely I'm interested to know how you propose to, particularly with the condition number 36, to carry out checks. You know, and do you have any equipment, or is it literally you go and listen and talk to a resident who says, "I think that's too noisy"? How are you going to do it?
It's literally that at this point in time. We're outside when there is entertainment. We have staff on a regular basis outside listening to the noise. I will walk around the premises on a regular basis to hear it. Just to make one slight point, I don't know if this makes any bearing. The actual noise of the motorway sometimes is louder than the voices of the audible conversations of the garden, which is something that I think really does need to be taken into account. As Ewan said, should there be need for any equipment in the future, we'd be more than happy to do this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bloxham.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one other question. The correspondence and what you've said this morning, obviously you're coming across as you want to be good neighbours with the residents that have made various representations with their concerns. And you're talking about reducing the hours, as you've just clarified with us today. Thank you for that. But it does appear from the officer's report, and I think it's in paragraph 1.15, that a visit was made on the 7th of May when the external bar area was already in use. And therefore, I wonder what assurances you can give us that all that you are saying today will actually be carried out, bearing in mind that the bar has been in use before the application's been granted.
I can only apologise that it was in use. It shouldn't have been. I think it's been there for some time, and it was brought to our attention by Adam himself. Actually, it said this needs to be rectified. I can only apologise for that, and the purpose of this application is to remedy that, to ensure that we are able to lawfully be able to use it.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Bloxham?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have one question just with regards to, and it's probably actually Mr. Holland who might be able to answer this. So in terms of live entertainment and live music outside, is that something you're planning on having regularly? And in what format will that take? Because live music can be a man with a guitar, or it can be a huge band or whatever. Is that? Could you just briefly, if you have any at this point, outline any plans that you may have for that particular activity?
Yes, so my main, some of you may not have been aware, as Ewan said, we run the Puffin Billy, which is in Exton. We've always, myself and my business partner, have always aimed to make family-run pubs that are very well known for their food. Wet-led establishments, I must hasten to add, are not what I'm interested in. I've run pubs for 16 years in North London. I've had many separate issues with pubs that are well known for their wet-led enterprises, and this isn't something I wanted to do. The bands and entertainment that I'm looking at doing are family bands. In fact, the neighbours have even said they've enjoyed the music directly across the road. And yes, as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't be able to say they would always be one-man bands, but they would be entertainment that families could come along to. For example, on the 27th of June, we have a car show, which is going to have family entertainers and bands along with that. So that's the type of entertainment. From the point of view of a regular basis, it's not something that I want to do every weekend, because I'm fully aware that we are in a residential, I don't actually think, myself personally, I know they've described this, I think we're a semi-rural area here with the noise of the road, etc., coming into play. So no, this isn't something I want to do regularly, but yes, it will take place throughout the year, perhaps on bank holiday weekends as such and things like that, but it's certainly not something I'm going to be doing every weekend, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else in the committee have any further questions at all? No? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Holland and Mr. McGregor. Do we have any questions from the interested parties? Okay. Can I just speak, Asita?
Sorry, yes, Chair. Can I just come in as legal advisor just to clarify one point? I think through Mr. McGregor, if I may. The plans, we've got on page 51, page 51, which is Appendix B1, the red line for the internal or the built form of the premises, which includes the shelter, which is the licensed area for all the licensable activities applied for. So I can understand that. On page 52, which is Appendix B2, we've got the external area, and I can see the external bar with a red line. So that's understood. And then we have consumption of alcohol, which is the green line. So I just want to clarify, my understanding is that that is alcohol which is sold outside for as an off sale will be drunk within the green line area. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. And then in terms of live music, can you help me with where that is going to take place? I had seen reference to the green line. Is that where the live music externally is to take place?
It's actually going to be more limited than that. And so my pages don't have numbers on them, but I think the legal advisor referred to Appendix B2, which I've got in front of me. I don't know if it's possible to put that up on the screen, and I can talk you through what area is going to be used for live music outside. Or I can simply talk you through the plan as it sits in front of me.
Is it possible to put that up on the screen?
Yes, Chair, can you just clarify, please, which
B2.
B2, yeah.
B2, thank you.
Which is page 52 as well.
Thank you, I'll rearrange it.
And you might also want to look at Appendix F. I'm not going to ask that you get this up as well, but if you look at Appendix F and the final photograph, which shows the pub to the right-hand side, a 5-bar gate, and a house to the left-hand side. Thank you very much. So if you see at the bottom of the plan, there is a gate that's opened inwards.
At the bottom left.
Bottom left, that's right. Yeah. And I'm using, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm using my mouse and no one can see it. There we go. Thank you very much. So bottom left, the 5-bar gate, which is just a little bit to the right. Whoever's got control of the mouse. There we go. And then the road bends round to the right. And it is all that area below the road and within the green line. That's right. That's absolutely right. Thank you very much. And if you look at the picture on Appendix F, that helps to put it into some context. It's the final photograph. There we go. Oh, down again. Up. So that's the, oh. There we go. So that is the 5-bar gate that I referred to. The road then bends round to the right, and it's this area here. You can't see all of it on this photograph, but it's perhaps a better indication of where the entertainment would be restricted to.
So can I just clarify from my perspective, the 5-bar gate, there's a strip of, there's the right-hand side of that 5-bar gate, then has the grassed area where we can see the tables and chairs that are currently out there. It's all of that grassed area to the right side of the path.
Yeah.
And it goes around to the right. And then on your plan, that ends with the green line, which is extending out to the back of the premises on the right-hand side.
Correct.
So, okay, so it's nothing, that the path itself and anything to the left of the path that we can see on this photo now is not included in the live music area.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So can I just then be clear about that? The requirement under the regulations is that the plan accompanying an application show each of the show on the plan the areas within the premises used for each licensable activity. So we can now see the red line is that for the external bar. You've now explained the area for live music, and my understanding is now late night refreshment is not applied for outside, so we don't do that. So a plan which identifies the live music area outside as you've described, which will be more restrictive than the green line, is what would be envisaged we would attach to an application if you see fit to grant.
Absolutely, yes.
And those would be the only two areas, the external bar and the live music area for the outside, that we would be identifying on the plan.
Correct.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So now, if there are any interested parties who wish to ask Mr. McGregor or Mr. Holland a question regarding the application, now is the time. Okay, so Mr. Pond. I think you need to unmute. Mr. Pond. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I'd like to point out that the photograph just shown in Appendix F is from 2016, when the outside bar was first constructed without planning permission. So it's been relocated since then, as shown by the red line on the map. It had a rather tortuous history because planning permission was applied for retrospectively and was refused by East Devon District Council. It went to the planning inspectorate, who also dismissed the appeal, came back to East Devon with the relocation, and that was granted, but only with very strict noise limitation requirements. So I think this is all very relevant. And I'd like to ask in that context, Mr. McGregor, in his letter of the 10th of May, he says, for example, that the requirement for an application for the replacement license has been brought about by the installation of a bar in the garden area of the premises. Well, that bar has been there for 5 years and has actually, had a colourful history as far as planning is concerned. So I don't see how it can be a requirement following the installation.
So, okay, so Mr. Pond, in terms of that being a question, are you asking Mr. McGregor to clarify that situation for you?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, Mr. McGregor.
Good morning, Mr. Pond. The background to the application is that my clients wanted to use the external bar for the sale of alcohol. It became apparent that it wasn't licensed, and that is why the application has been made to ensure that it is licensed, that it's properly licensed, and that we can use it. I've tried to be, my clients have tried to be as open and transparent in their letter to you and to the other residents. There's no intention to try and mislead you as to what we're trying to do here. It wasn't licensed, and we're now trying to license it, and that's the rub of it, really.
Yes, I didn't get that message loud and clear actually from your application, but thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pond. Do we have any more questions from interested parties? No. Okie dokie then. Right. Now, it is time to hear the interested parties' case. So again, any interested parties will have 10 minutes to speak each regarding the application, and will be given a 30-second warning. Okay, so do we have any? Okay, can we just go back to our legal advisor before we proceed with that?
Sorry, Chair, just one final point on the plans.
That's fine.
We're clear again, so we're on Appendix B2 for the external area. We're now clear what the live music area is and the external bar. I just want to go back to Mr. McGregor on consumption of alcohol. Is that to be the green line as originally on the plan, or is it the more restricted area in line with the live music?
Can I just ask, and I'll do it via an email with Adam, just for confirmation of that. If you
Yeah.
I'm happy for you to carry on, or if you want an answer to that, but I will find you an answer during the course of the hearing.
As far as I'm concerned, it's fine that it's clarified before we,
Before you close, yeah, that's fine. Okay.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay, so Asta,
Thank you, Chair. That's all that I had.
brilliant. That's fine. Okay, so interested parties, can I be advised as to who we have wishing to speak? And
Chair, Mr. Pond advised that he wished to speak, and I think Mr. and Mrs. Sewell as well.
okay, that's fine. Okay, well, we'll go in that order then. Mr. Pond, are you ready to give your representation?
Yes, thank you. Well, my neighbours and I think that the current license arrangement for the Blue Ball is already very generous. Under a series of tenant managers over the last 10 years or so, we've had to make several formal complaints to the Planning and Environmental Health Department of East Devon District Council. We are concerned that the current application, if granted, would exacerbate these problems. So as has been mentioned, I and most of our neighbours are patrons of the Blue Ball and want the pub to prosper. However, we feel that it should be part of our local community, which is defined in our parish's neighbourhood plan as a farming hamlet. So in summary, our concerns have been set out in our representations and relate to disorder, protection of children, safety and prevention of nuisance. Disorderly behaviour by a minority occurs occasionally, including rowdiness on leaving the premises and even brawling and, I'm afraid, urination in adjacent properties. There are several teenage and young children living in the houses immediately around the pub, and the unsavoury behaviour I've just described sets a very poor example. Public safety is sometimes put at risk by careless or boisterous behaviour outside the pub. There are no pavements along Clyst Road, so patrons exit directly onto the road. Often taxis and other vehicles pull up directly outside the pub, creating an additional hazard for pedestrians and other traffic. The most serious source of public nuisance is noise, especially from music in the beer garden. Under the current license, broadcasting recorded music outside is not permitted. Of course, live music is permitted, and our community does not object to occasional truly live music. However, to give a recent example, so-called live music events were held in the beer garden on the 17th and 18th of April. And on both occasions, the performers were accompanied by recorded beat backing music played from the patio, which is indicated on the map, adjacent to the road and only 13 meters from my house. The recorded music was amplified to such a degree that it could be heard plainly in all rooms of our double glazed house and rendered our garden unusable. And I'm sure, as Mr. and Mrs. Sewell will confirm, that this penetrating beat music was particularly distressing for them as parents of young children in their house, which abuts the beer garden. So we hope the licensing committee will help to sustain our community's character by rejecting this application. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Pond. Do we, as a committee, have any questions for Mr. Pond? Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Pond, for that. I noted that you mentioned that you'd made several formal complaints to East Devon District Council's Environmental Health.
Yes.
But in our report, we have got no representations from Environmental Health. Were those complaints upheld in any way, or and was anything done about that at the time, please?
Oh, yes. Well, the history goes right back to 2016. Jill Weller was the officer in charge at that time. She has retired, I believe, quite recently. At the time when the planning inspectorate made their decision, a formal noise assessment was carried out here, because at that time recorded music was being broadcast from the outside bar, and it was way above the permitted levels. As Adam Holland has pointed out, there is quite a high background here because of the motorway. It can be around 60 decibels. And the regulations say that any noise more than 10 decibels above background has a serious impact on people around. The actual levels were way above that. They were up in the it was 87 decibels was the highest recorded. So there has been a history of very loud music here, and I'm sure my other neighbours are very concerned that this will continue. It took 2 years for the planning dispute to be resolved. And the Environmental Health Department have been very helpful, but all these things take time, and one needs quantitative measures of the noise levels, which is not an easy thing to arrange.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bloxham. Councillor Dent, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a handle on this. So Dr. Pond's been talking about what's happened in the past, and I fully appreciate that. My question is, okay, so we now have a different proposal from the brewery, which reduces the hours outside, which controls the noise levels through music. How does he feel about that offer? Because there's been no reply to it, and I'd like to know.
Yes, I was very pleased to receive the offer. Certainly the hours were specified, but the noise levels were not. It's the nature of the noise. It seems to me and my neighbours that live music is permitted, but what it actually means is you can have a single instrumentalist playing a guitar and perhaps singing, but he comes along with an amplified beat backing system, which is played extremely loudly. That's recorded music, surely. So I didn't feel that the nature of the concessions were really addressing the noise problem.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Dent? No. Okay. That is an interesting question. It's not something I've considered before. I'm not sure if we can get any legal advice regarding this. In terms of a recorded backing track, does that count as live music or recorded music? Astor, I don't know if you know.
Thank you, Chair. So I heard that. I am just checking, but if I can give a preliminary response and perhaps through you, Chair, invite Mr. McGregor to respond to that as well. But my view, preliminary view, and I will check, is that if there is a live component to the music that's made, so if someone is singing, for example, or playing a live instrument, then it would be classed as live music, even if the backing is recorded. It's if there's an element of live music to it, it's classed as live music and not recorded. That would be my preliminary view, but I will check. And I think it would be helpful to hear from Mr. McGregor on that as well, through you, Chair.
Yeah, definitely. Mr. McGregor, do you have any?
I agree with that assessment.
This brings about the fascinating scenario where I could have backing music and play a triangle, and that would then become live music. So I look forward to trying that out at some point.
So speaks a musician.
Yeah, triangle, Alan. Okay. Do we have any further questions for Mr. Pond? Mr. McGregor. Yeah, I was going to come to you now. So, do you have any questions?
Sorry, I can't see where I can put up my electronic hand, so I just have to raise it in sort of a old-fashioned way.
I believe it's under reactions if you need to in future.
Oh right. Okay. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Mr. Pond. I suppose it follows on from a point that's made by Councillor Dent, is that you've asked for the committee to refuse the application, but which would leave us in a position with our existing licence, which you accept is much more generous. The existing licence is more generous than that which we have applied for.
I don't think I said that. I said that I and my neighbours feel that the current licence is already very generous. Obviously the new application for being allowed to serve beer in the garden until 10:30 at night is a considerable extension of the licence. That was my intention.
There are just so that we're clear, there are no restrictions on the use of the garden at the moment in terms of consumption of alcohol. and the word I wrote down is that you invited the committee to reject the application, but we'll leave that there. I've been texting Adams whilst you were speaking. He says to me that you have not picked up any of the concerns or issues that you've had with the pub since he's been there. Is that right?
Well, no, that's definitely not true. And I certainly made a formal complaint to Environmental Health following the events on the 17th and 18th of April. And they told me, the officer is called Ian Winter. He explained that a letter of complaint would be sent to the Blue Ball about that issue, although the person or persons complaining would not be specified at that stage. They sent me a diary to record any further noisy events, and they said they would take action if those nuisance problems continue.
But you didn't pick it up directly with Adam?
When we first saw the application for the new license on posters around the pub, I wrote to Adam and asked him to come to explain to us what his plans were. And Adam did come across and spoke to myself and one of my neighbors. But I didn't feel from that conversation that I had a clear view of what his plans were. He gave the impression that he really didn't want to change very much. And he didn't explain particularly that the outside bar would be open so late on possibly all evenings of the week. That conversation took place before the 17th and 18th of April. So it was before the very noisy so-called live music event.
Well, hopefully you've got greater clarity on what is proposed now following our presentation and the further reduction in hours that we've proposed and what you've heard from Adam. But I have no further questions for Mr. Pond.
Rats, I was muted. I was hoping to go through a whole meeting without that happening. Okay, so we now move on to the next interested party, which I believe is Mr. Sewell. Thank you, Mr. Pond.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep, certainly can.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate your time and thanks for having us today. Just want to start by saying thanks for the opportunity to speak, but also to reiterate that we're not unreasonable people on this. This isn't something that we are vehemently opposed to for any other reason than trying to make sure that we can live a good quality of life here. That's not to say that we haven't already, and living next door to a pub, living next door to Blue Pool in particular, was one of the reasons that we moved to the area. So we've got a great affinity with the pub. We've got great respect for it, and it's a real good place, part of the community. I think one of the key things for us was trying to make sure that we are able to control that noise that comes from that side of our house within our own limitations. People talking about the motorway noise, absolutely right. It does create a noise disturbance for us, but something you get used to. But that allows us to shut the windows. That allows us to keep that noise out, and that allows us not to be bothered by that on our own terms. And just for people's information on the plan, we are the house adjacent to the garden, so the perimeter wall of the that's the end of our house. So not an issue with pub noise. The pub has been open since lockdown eased, and it has been completely manageable. It's been absolutely fine. On the rare occasion there has been music, it has been unbearable, I think is probably the word, and that probably has fueled our representation more than anything. The example being on Saturday, 17th of August, as Mr. Pond, April, as Mr. Pond alluded to, it made our garden unmanageable, and I don't know whether it's unreasonable to be able to want to stand in your garden and hear your son talking when he stood next to you, and that wasn't possible. That gave us a glimpse into what possibly could happen, and that's why we want to make sure that the restrictions are such that it doesn't impact us in that way. I think there are the offer that's been made by through Mr. McGregor's letter. I think it goes some way to do that, but it does still concern us that music can be played that late at night. We do have a young son, and sleep has been disturbed through the music being played, which we aren't able to lock out. And as I said, with the motorway noise, we are able to control that. With the music that was played in that particular over that particular weekend, we were unable to do that. There wasn't a room in the house we could go into. We couldn't hear the television in the front room. It was very, very loud in my son's bedroom, and that for me is not acceptable. I have had a conversation with Adam, and this isn't in any way reflective on Adam. I've spoken to Adam on one occasion after this, after that weekend, and it became obvious we can have a conversation, and I do want to do that. I do find the offer of open transparency via the letter dated 10th of May from Mr. McGregor slightly disingenuous in the sense that it's an offer to be open transparency. This is the first contact we've had from the brewery at all. This is the first information we've had on this, and as part of a mediation prior to this. So I've got no desire not to speak to people. I just want to be given the opportunity to do that, and I don't think that's come forward. And as Mr. Pond has said, this isn't a new thing. This isn't a new license. This isn't a new premises, and we're aware of that. But if we want to have an honest, open conversation, that's absolutely fine, and we're happy to do that. I think that there are multiple things that we bring to this in terms of our concerns, and I think Mr. Pond did some of them in terms of people climbing over our wall. We've had damage to our wall. We've had people outside our house late at night. We live next to a pub. We understand these things happen, but what we don't want to do is that to be something that we continue to do. And I think as that particular weekend gave us an insight into that, that's what it could be. In terms of the offer, yes, the hours are generous, but again, my concerns with that, and I don't see anything wrong with the temporary extension licenses if the licensing committee consider the hour offers to be too generous. On what we said, I don't know whether that's the case, but I don't necessarily see that to be an issue if, as the plan is, to be as infrequently and as irregular as has been alluded to. I do understand why the brewery want to get that license in its continuous form, so the option is there, and I get that. And I reiterate, we don't want anything but success for the pub because we think it's a valuable part of the community. However, what this license is currently predicated on is the existing landlord. If that was to change, we have no control over what the next landlord does and how that then impacts our life. And if that continues to be the case every weekend, we would have no option but to leave our home, because it would be untenable. I don't want that to be the case. I enjoy living here, and I feel a part of the community. There are lots of things that we do concede with the pub, that it is noisy, and we can control that. It is there are lots of people, and we respect that. There's lots and lots of people on a rugby match, for instance. There are hundreds and hundreds of people descend upon us, and I've had people kicking rugby balls at the car, and I've had people standing and shouting and swearing, and my child's exposed to that. I get that. I can deal with that. I can understand that because I live next door to a pub. I'm not unreasonable, but that music and that example of what it could be like more frequently, I think is something that concerns me more than anything. And again, I don't doubt Adam's sincerity when he says that that's not the nature of the pub, and I don't doubt that's going to be I don't doubt that sincerity in the plan of it not being a regular thing. But again, that comes back to my concern of that's on the current situation with the current landlord. If that was to change, I don't know what that then looks like. I do have to raise the concerns that given the use of property outside the licence, given our representative status, and we've asked before for music to stop, it has continued. We've asked before for things to be turned down, and it hasn't. You can understand our concern that plans in place might not be adhered to. And with the things like the noise log, I think that's wonderful. I think that's a great thing to be part of the submission. But again, I just have concerns about the genuine nature of this application, how that will be brought around. I think that's that's it from us. I mean, if we were to make an offer, I think 6 o'clock is a fine cutoff for music. I don't know how that plays into offers and to thoughts in terms of the hours and where it would come. And but I think there are other considerations that ultimately, if there are musicians on site, which again we've got no issue with. I think we've had good examples of where it can work. But we don't necessarily understand why it has to be right outside our front window on the front, where there are lots of areas within the patch that could be better placed, I think, for us to give us a better quality of life, and ultimately that we can sit in our front room, not have to listen to the music next door, which we are able to do at the moment, where we can block it off. It's when we can't, and as Mr. Pond said, the amplified music made that an incredibly difficult process for us, and that's potentially the key driver behind our representation. Have to take any questions, but yeah, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sill. Do we have any questions from Councillor Dent or Councillor Bloxham? No, none from Councillor Dent, Councillor Bloxham. Okay, I think you've put your point of view across fairly clearly. I don't think I have any questions either. So thank you very much, Mr. Sill. And is that the and Mr. Pond, yeah, is that the extent of the interested parties? I think there was one other, but I'm not sure if they're here, or is that everybody?
Chair, I think that's the extent of them now. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to all. So now I will ask Mr. McGregor if he'd like to make a final statement with regards to this before we go away and have a discussion. Mr. McGregor.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your patience this morning. I've listened, as of my clients, to what's been said by the local residents, and we've been exchanging messages during the course of this. The current license is a much more flexible one than that which we have applied for, and I think the offers that St Austell Brewery have made to the residents, and that have been repeated today, and also further reductions in the types of entertainment that we wish to provide at the premises, need to be borne very carefully in mind. I'm not going to take you through huge rafts of policy, but I know that your legal advisor will be aware of what paragraph 9.12 of the national guidance says, is that each responsible authority will be an expert in their respective field. And the point is that you should be going to those parties primarily as a starting point where there are suggestions of issues of, in this particular case, noise nuisance, or where it's antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder, then you go to the police. None of those parties have made representations, and they would have been perfectly at liberty to make representations to this application, particularly given the points that have been made by both Mr. Pond and Mr. Sewell about the events on the weekend of, I think it was the 17th of April, but they haven't, and so we're unable to actually go behind the fact that they take no part in the application. We engaged fully with all of the responsible authorities and the police in the course of the application, and as a consequence of that, we have come up with our schedule of 40 plus conditions. And the basis of the application, I said at the outset, is the licensing, or the genesis of it was the licensing of the external bar. A few points to make in relation to the use of the garden. And I'm not going to repeat what is said in your report to the committee about deregulated entertainment, because your legal advisor will be all over that, and he will advise you accordingly in relation to what is and what is not regulated entertainment, and what appropriate conditions that you can put on the license in relation to that. Safe to say that at the moment there are no conditions in relation to the provision of entertainment in the garden, and what we have offered today is to reduce entertainment in the garden from the existing hours back to 8 o'clock, and to add in further conditions at conditions 34 to 39. And if there are issues, or if the issues persist, then Adam is an approachable guy. The residents can speak to him, and if they want to, they can speak to the environmental health officer, and enforcement action can be taken, or the installation of a noise limiter. So there are a number of stages along the way that can happen before you restrict any further the provision of entertainment in the garden. The point was made, a couple of points that were made by Mrs. Sewell, and fairly, so I don't understand why these forms of entertainment can't be provided by temporary event notices. Temporary event notices are, you'll know what they are, so I'm not going to teach my grandmother to suck eggs, but they get granted without condition. The point about putting live entertainment on the license is that you can then condition the license, which regulates the way in which live entertainment can be provided within the premises. And that's why we have offered the conditions that we have done. And I think it was Mr. Sewell that said generously, they have no problem with Adam, but what happens when there is a change of control? And it's the whole purpose of this application is to future-proof this license, so that, and Adam has no intention, as far as I'm aware, of leaving the pub, is that the conditions that we've offered on the application future-proof this license for not only when Adam is around, but for when, as and when a new tenant might arrive at the premises. So the application, I would invite you to grant the application. If you don't, arguably the resident's position is worse than it is at the present time, because there are no conditions on the current license. The hours for the sale of alcohol that we've offered are exactly the same. The hours for the provision of regulated entertainment, and in particular live music, are more restrictive than that which is on the current license. And we have offered a raft of conditions that are more onerous and should give the residents more comfort than the conditions that currently persist on the license. I think Mr. Sewell said, well, I'm not sure whether or not this noise log will be adhered to and will be completed. It is a condition on the license. If you breach a condition on the license, you can have your license reviewed and you can have your license revoked. And so that is the sanction, and that is the benefit to the local residents. So I would invite you to grant the applications we've applied for with the revisions that I set out at the start of my presentation. And if the residents do have any continuing issues, then I would invite them to speak to the pub direct, speak to Adam direct, or speak to the business development manager.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Can I just go to Asta, the legal advisor, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, I think, 2 points just for Mr. McGregor. Yeah. The first was, I was asking about the external area and the consumption of alcohol, and I think you were going to clarify whether that's now the more restricted area consistent with the live music area, or whether it's the green line that was applied for.
It is the green line area that was on the application. And I know, I feel obliged to say this, and I know your legal advisor will know this, but the consumption of alcohol is, of course, not a licensable activity.
Yeah, so, but you do want on the plan, if the committee were to grant this license, you want on the plan the green line area for the consumption of alcohol to be
we're happy.
Specified as applied for, which is the wider area. Thank you. And then just the other point I wanted to just raise is, in terms of deregulation, the officer report is very full, And my advice to the committee is consistent with what you have on pages 16 and 17 of the officer report, which refers to all the relevant parts of the national guidance and makes the point at paragraph 6.4 as to what the premises is allowed to do, notwithstanding what conditions can be applied. So by that I mean between the hours of 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock, the premises can have live music and amplified up to 500 people where it has the sale of alcohol on the premises. I just wanted to understand, Mr. McGregor, just to be as clear as we can on that. Is it your understanding conditions 34 to 39 are what you offer up as conditions relating to live and recorded music? So my understanding is those conditions would be suspended between the hours of 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock. Is that your understanding or not?
I'm not on mute, am I? If you look at 16 point, I don't have page numbers, I'm afraid, on the report that I've got through it. If you look at 6.4 of the report,
yes.
and it talks about beer gardens, and it's 16.44. The problem with the Live Music Act is that where operators want to offer conditions to try and address the concerns and issues that have been raised by the local residents, those conditions get suspended. But we have offered those conditions in good faith, and we are happy for them to be applied to the license.
Okay, that's very clear. So notwithstanding the fact that those conditions as a matter of law would be suspended, you are telling the committee, obviously these are recorded proceedings and there will be minutes, that you're committing to comply with those conditions notwithstanding the terms of the Deregulation Act.
Yeah, we wouldn't have offered them if we weren't going to comply with them.
Okay, that's helpful. So then just one other point, and conditions of course are without prejudice to what the committee consider or whether they grant or refuse. So it's just for clarification only. But the points have been raised by Mr. Sewell about live music close to his premises, and we can see how you've restricted the area for live music. Just so it's clear, in terms of the area, is there any scope for the provision of live music further away within the area that you've identified, but further away from the nearest residential premises, which I understand is Mr. Sewell's, and or facing speakers away from his property? Is there any scope for that or not? And what's your view on that? And that's obviously subject to anything the committee consider. It's just a question of clarification.
I can speak to my clients, but I think that it would be, I've seen on other licenses that any speakers are inward facing, or I hope that comment makes sense. It's that they're facing towards the premises and not towards the residents. And if it's felt appropriate to have that as a condition. And I'm staring at my emails to see whether or not my clients are going to be hopping up and down saying don't offer that. But that does not seem to me to be an inappropriate condition.
And what about the location of those speakers? So within the more restricted area that you've identified for live music, obviously there's an area which is between the premises and Mr. Sewell's property, and there's an area, if I can put it this way, round the back or sort of further around the side. Obviously without prejudice to what the committee is considering, but is there any scope for speakers to be round the back or rather further away from Mr. Sewell's properties?
I can speak to my clients now, and if you want to give me 2 minutes, then I can have a chat with them about that. And
Chair, I'm in your hands. It's just a question of clarification.
Okay, it would be good to have that clarification. Shall we take an early comfort break and see if we can get that in the next 10 minutes if we all come back at 11? if you could try and find that out, Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, if it's helpful, then I'll set up a quick call with my clients now.
That's great. Okay. Well, if we take a comfort break for 10 minutes, we'll be back at 11, just to tie up those loose ends. Okay. See you in a little while, everybody. Thank you.
Chair, I think we're ready to continue whenever you are.
Yep, that's fine. Okay then. Thank you for all returning. Could we just go to the committee's legal advisor, Asta, again, just to, I guess, re-ask or restate the query that he had, and then hopefully Mr. McGregor can come back and respond to that.
Thank you. I think so. We've already clarified that the premises are agreeable to speakers facing away from the nearest residential property, which I believe is Mr. Sills. The question was whether there's any scope for the live music and speakers to be placed somewhere around the back of the premises within the green line, if there's any scope for that, or whether it needs to be the whole of the area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McGregor?
Yeah, hi. So I've had a chance to speak to my clients. The area that we would like for live entertainment is that which I outlined at the start of the application. So there is, unfortunately, and we're trying to accommodate the residents as best we can through the various concessions that we've made. But the area that that it is proposed to provide live entertainment is that which was outlined at the start of the application. Yes, all speakers would be inward facing or would be pointing in towards the pub and away from the residents. So we can agree to that as well.
Okay, thank you. I have a question as well regarding the length of time of events that live music events continue. Just so it sounds to me as if a lot of the representations have been talking about the sort of continual nature of these events and the fact that it went on for all day and an evening, and there seemed to be no let up. How, would the applicant be willing potentially to put a time limit on the length of any one event that occurs? Is that something that would fit in with the way that you think you foresee the live music operating?
So in addition to providing the earlier finishing time to give you an indication of when they might start, is that the question?
Well, just so potentially, no longer, just plucking a figure from my head, no longer than 4 hours a day, or something, so that it's not going to start at the first opportunity of the day, then go on until sort of 8 in the evening.
I mean, I don't know, and I'll wait for the ping of my phone for a message to come through. But I suppose what I would say is we have made a significant number of concessions throughout this, from what is A, in place at the moment, and B, what the Live Music Act permits us to provide through deregulated entertainment. You've also heard from Adam that these events are infrequent of nature. They are better controlled through a premises license rather than temporary event notices where there are no conditions attached to temporary event notice. And we can't give you an indication of the time. What I can say is that where these events are taking place is that we will let the local residents know.
Okay. Would you be, I'm assuming one of the interested parties, Mr. Sewell, has his hand up. I'm assuming it's a question for you. Are you happy to answer that at this point? Or?
Well, it's really a matter for the legal advisor, but I want to try and be helpful, and if I can, then I will.
No, that's fine. I'm happy. It's just a little bit out of order in terms of the meeting, but if you're happy to, yeah, getting the nod from us. So yeah, Mr. Sewell.
Just to say apologies. Thank you. We're a bit unsure of the process and things, so yeah, we really appreciate that. Thank you. My wife just wanted to ask a question. That's okay.
Yeah, so it's just in relation to, obviously we're talking about the speakers facing away from our property, a possibility of moving the live music to a different part of that green area. One of the questions for me is that obviously the live music is there for the patrons of the pub, the people that are sat in the beer garden. That seating area now with the covered area is quite a small area. So our question would be, why is there a requirement for amplified music? If the music is purely for the patrons in the beer garden, which again is a small area, can't it be a microphone, an acoustic guitar and a singer, rather than amplified music, which is what has the impact on the neighbouring properties? The pub noise is there anyway, and you know, we live with that, but it's the amplified music, regardless of where you point the speakers, that is having an impact on the property and the surrounding properties. So that would be my question: why amplified music? Can it not just be for the people in the beer garden rather than the neighbouring properties as well?
Mr. McGregor.
I suppose the answer to that is that in relation to amplified music, it's not so much why amplified music, but it's the level at which that is set, and that's why there are conditions in relation to noise checks being put forward on the license.
Okay, thank you very much. I would also say I have been advised. I would just read from the live. I think it's the Live Music Act, S182.1630. A drum machine or backing track being used to accompany a vocalist or a band would be part of the performance of amplified live music. So that does count as live music. And thank you to Asta for that. Okay, right. So I think at this point, the subcommittee will go away and make their decision. I'd like to thank Mr. McGregor, Mr. Holland, and all of the other interested parties. And I advise you that the subcommittee will notify all parties of its decision within 5 working days. Okay, so thank you all very much for your contributions this morning. And as I say, you will discover the outcome of this within 5 working days. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
That brings item 6 to an end. We do have an item 7 on the agenda, but we will, the committee will have a break and we will be back at 2 o'clock as per the agenda, when the live stream will become unpaused. Okay. So thank you for now, everyone.